From The National, this is Trending Middle East. I'm Yasmin Al-Taji. It's Friday, August 14th. Here are today's headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump is meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin today in Alaska. The goal is to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. The announcement of the meeting came last week after Trump said the parties were close to a ceasefire deal that could involve, quote, some swapping of territories, unquote.
Security preparations are being beefed up across the skies of Alaska in preparedness for Presidents Trump and Putin and the summit.
The National's Manus Cranny reports.
Preparation and expectation setting are critical here. This will be the first face-to-face meeting by President Trump and Putin since returning to the White House. The stakes are high. This is a feeling-out meeting. That's what President Trump called it. And perhaps the most contentious issue of all before the meeting is the demands that Russia made that Ukraine gives up Donetsk and Luhansk. Preconditions to a ceasefire and serious negotiations.
Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky is not expected to attend the meeting today. The leaders of several European nations and the EU held what they called a constructive meeting with Donald Trump.
The meeting, he described it as being 10 out of 10. The message was clear: I want a ceasefire or face severe consequences. But the table was being set by President Trump for a fast and furious follow-up. That would be including Volodymyr Zelensky. However, he wants to see a clear commitment to a ceasefire before those trilateral engagement may take place, possibly in Turkey.
Europe is eager to show a united front to help avoid a bad outcome for Ukraine after this meeting. Trump said there would be, quote, severe consequences, unquote, for Russia if it failed to reach a ceasefire with Ukraine. In a joint statement, the group said no peace agreement can be decided without Ukraine, and that sanctions and other economic measures should be strengthened if Russia does not agree to a ceasefire. Ahead of Friday, Trump said there would be, quote, severe consequences, unquote, for Russia if it failed to reach a ceasefire with Ukraine.
Territorial negotiations, as I said, are perhaps at the heart of the issue here and only can take place with Zelensky in the room. Those were the words of President Macron. So what is severity? Well, already we have what are called secondary tariffs on India of 25% because they buy Russian oil. And herein lies the point. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said the EU needs to join in and do more on sanctions if necessary. It is time to put up or shut up. That is what Scott Bessent referred to in regards to secondary tariffs. At the G7 meeting, everybody around the table, when he asked them, are you prepared to place 200% secondary tariffs on China? Well, everybody looked down at their new shoes. And therein lies the issue. How much more is Europe and the allies prepared to do to deliver a peace deal and put pressure on Putin 3.5 years into this war?
Aid efforts in Sweida are under fire. 5 Druze humanitarian aid workers were abducted by unknown assailants while delivering vital aid to Syria's besieged Sweida province this week. That's according to aid workers and activists who spoke to The National. Routine attacks on convoys are threatening what's considered a lifeline for tens of thousands trapped in Sweida. The National's Nada Homsi reports.
On Monday, 7 out of 8 vehicles carrying privately donated aid from Jaramana, a predominantly Druze suburb of Damascus, were ambushed and looted by unknown assailants. One aid volunteer who was coordinating with the convoy said that if all 8 of the vehicles had arrived to the province, they would have helped around 2,000 to 4,000 households. The only accessible route into Sweida has been repeatedly attacked in recent weeks, as exemplified by this week's incident. Last Friday, another example, the Syrian Arab Red Crescent reported that a convoy was directly targeted by gunfire, damaging 3 vehicles. Problems on that road are common, which also makes aid delivery a dangerous job.
Hostilities between armed tribesmen and Druze militias broke out on July 13th. Since then, Sweida has been under a government lockdown. The province relies on intermittent aid and suffers from limited electricity and dwindling supplies. The Syrian government denies it's imposing a siege, but the province remains inaccessible except through a single humanitarian crossing, which requires prior coordination with authorities for entry and exit.
Now, the aid workers that I spoke with said 4 drivers for the convoy were Sunni Muslims and that they were immediately released after they had been surrounded. The 5 aid workers that are of the Druze sect are still being kept in an undisclosed location. At first, it appeared the kidnappers were trying to leverage the abductions to negotiate a prisoner exchange, but then they went dark. The kidnapped men have not been heard from since Tuesday, despite efforts to secure their release.
A security agreement between Iran and Iraq is getting backlash from the U.S. The agreement signed on Monday aims to tighten border security cooperation between Iran and Iraq. The U.S. has long opposed Tehran's close ties with Baghdad, and Baghdad has been under pressure from Washington to rein in Iran-backed militias within its borders. The deal came after Ali Larijani, Iran's Supreme National Security Council head, visited Iraq on Monday. That came amid deep divisions in the country over a proposed law that would cement the role of the PMF, the Popular Mobilization Forces, a coalition composed mainly of pro-Iran paramilitary groups. The agreement is a continuation of a pact made in March 2023 to increase security in the Iraqi Kurdistan region, which Tehran accuses of harboring armed opposition groups. Meanwhile, officials in Baghdad have said the agreement aims to curb cross-border infiltration by Kurdish groups that Iran says has caused unrest. That's all for this morning's headlines. You can get more on these stories and our live coverage at our site, thenationalnews.com. Yasmin Altaji, The National.